Here's how I answered explain a time you failed in my medical school interview. I just want to preface this by saying this isn't one of the more like commonly like thought of questions that you're going to get asked during an interview, but I got asked this multiple times across multiple interviews, so definitely a good idea to come up with a response for this. So my response was I did a lab and in my sophomore year, and it was called my quantitative analysis lab. It was an extra lab I needed to take for my chemistry minor in the class, and the lab was extremely difficult. It was nothing like I'd ever done before, still hands down the hardest lab I'd ever had in undergrad. And when I first took the lab and I got my first lab grade back, I straight up failed. I got like a 30 on the lab, and we thankfully had a drop grade, so I was able to drop that grade, like that lab from our from my overall grade. But I was really frazzled and really nervous. My lab technique skills were really just not good, and this lab required such precision in every single step and a lot of thought going into everything, and I wasn't prepared for that. So after that failure, I kind of just like regrouped myself, and I started going to my professor's office hours 2 times a week. I banded together with some other people in my study group or in my lab group, and I prepared rigorously for these labs, like step by step by step, and I filled in any gaps where I might have some issues, really reaching out to the professor, making sure I'm keeping up with everything, in contact with them in office hours. And then when I was in lab, I would prepare the day of before lab, and I would also review the labs and all the techniques right after lab. And I really just pushed myself to put the extra effort and hours in on a technique that I wasn't strong on, which was really precise lab skills. And after that first lab and doing that, I got an A on every single lab that I did. So we had 9 more labs, and I ended up with an A in that lab class. And I talked about what the importance of re-strategizing and how important that was in that moment for me to be able to pivot when I had a clear weakness and I needed to become really good at it in a short amount of time, and the importance of reaching out to others and reaching out to my professors for help and things like that. So that is what I talked about in my med school interview, and I kind of I was like, I connected to med school, like this is also, I do believe, prepared me for med school, because I know I'm going to come across classes and labs and things like that I'm not as naturally good in, but I have the skills now, especially from this experience, to be able to pivot and to really just come up with good ways to re-strategize and, do better, and if anything, do so well. So I was really proud of that moment. I failed, but I learned so much about it. And yeah, I think that was, I felt like it was really good. We had a really good conversation. It came across very authentic. And that was a really hard time. That I still think about that lab. I had grit. Like, I got a 30 on that first lab, and I got that grade dropped, and I was like, this is never ever gonna happen again. I remember the hours I put in throughout the week for a 1 credit lab. This wasn't even the class. The class was relatively, like, it wasn't that difficult. This was just the lab. The hours I put in, the office hours, just sitting there. And I was always the last one out of the lab. Like, I was checking everything to a T. And the TA, I was like up the TAs, like I was with them 24/7. Like, I was like always talking to them. So yeah, that is how I answered that question. I think if you come up with a response for this, or you kind of pre-plan it, just think of, talking about how you grew from it, and maybe how those skills can translate into your experience in med school. And yeah, I hope this helps.